All right, everybody. We're going to start our next session. Our next session is how blockchains are shaping the future. Our presenter today is Jeremy Saxey, the CEO and co-owner of Radiate WP, and he brings a wealth of experience in web technologies dating back to the dial-up era. With a degree in CIS earned in 2007, Jeremy has continually pushed the boundaries of innovation, from programming small websites to managing enterprise-level projects and server setups. His passion for emerging technologies, particularly in the realm of Web3, has seen him at the forefront of guiding others through each wave of innovation. Jeremy's dedication to the WordPress community is evident through his involvement in WordCamp organizing teams, his contributions to the Arizona WordPress meetup group, and his role as a presenter at both local meetups and the annual WordCamp conference that you guys are here at today. As a member of decentralized autonomous organization focused on promoting public goods and education within the Ethereum Web3 ecosystem, Jeremy is committed to sharing his thoughts and expertise with others. Attendees of his sessions can expect to be inspired by his enthusiasm and captivated by his deep understanding of how human ingenuity continues to shape the digital landscape. So please welcome Jeremy to the stage.
All right, can everyone hear me all right? All right, good? Good. All right, so I just got onto the schedule a few days ago, so my talk is a little bit just getting ripe. So I didn't want to regurgitate an old talk. I love talking about this stuff. I'm very involved with it, and I can't shut up about it, so I just forced myself to write a whole new thing, so bear with me a bit as I go through it. The topic today, online to on-chain. I'm going to talk about blockchains and how they're fundamentally changing humanity right now and some of the new ways that we can interact with the internet itself. If you want to get the slides, they're right there. So if you want to scan that and get it, whatever you can. And a little bit about me. I started in WordPress, and I do that professionally for 16 years, and so that's my main gig. In blockchain, it's a hobby of mine, and I started hearing about it around like 2010 when shortly after the Bitcoin white paper came out. I had heard about it. It sounded like a cute technology. I thought it was cool, and all of that, but no concept of that it would actually materialize or any of that kind of fun stuff. So then in 2017, there was a cycle that came through, all the hype built, and everybody was kind of rushing in. I came in really late to that, and then I lost a bunch of money. So then I got mad, rage quit, and kind of left it for a while. So then, but then another cycle came, and I got in earlier on this one, and this was late 2020. And at that time, I made a decision to stay active in it because I already knew the technology from way back in 2010 was solid. There was something there. So this time I said, okay, get through all the hype and all the emotional stuff going on and speculation and just dig in. And so get into the text. So I say that it's a hobby, but I am really active in it. Like was mentioned in the intro, I'm part of Mainnet DAO. And we promote public education and public goods on Ethereum. I go to conferences. That's me with my son. It was a family-friendly conference in Hawaii. I'm going to Thailand this year too for another crypto conference. And there's me last year speaking on blockchains again. Like I said, I don't shut up about this stuff. And so that was a year ago speaking about that. All right. So then the next thing here, just I put this up always because I'm not giving financial advice here, so don't worry about any of that. I'm just going to be talking about the technology, but also money is really deeply ingrained in what it is. And I'm going to talk more about, if you saw my talk last year, I know a few people were that are in here were in that one. So thanks for returning. And there's more talk of money in this one just because it's part of the topic. And how many here have interacted with the blockchain and have wallets, and has anybody coded on it and coded? Okay. All right, so let's zoom out. This is going to be a pretty broad talk, very high level at first, and then we'll dig in a little bit more. But I want to talk about how it's changing humanity. So this is very, very fundamental to just human existence and how we interact and things like that. So let's rewind to the pre-Renaissance days. Back then, way back, humans used to have some medieval system. There was feudal lords with taxation, and there was a lot of barter going on, so it was a very weak economic structure. There was monarchy, and part of that setup was the divine right of kings. So everybody in society thought of those authority figures as both religious and political leaders. And I think that's important to understand how they had those concepts together in their mind, that your leader did everything, that they were all encompassing, and that the idea hadn't even been introduced yet, that they could be different than that. So how mind-blowing it can be. So let's talk about what happened, though, with the Renaissance and how people's minds changed. One of the important innovations from WordPress, everybody should know, one of the main inventions from the Renaissance. From a WordPress world, we talk about it a lot. Gutenberg, right. That's right. So Gutenberg was invented. A few years before that Gutenberg, there was the Gutenberg printing press. And another innovation that's very relevant that I want to talk about is what was born out of that time was also double entry bookkeeping. And that was actually a really fundamental change. It's very basic now, but what these two specific things did is they enabled faster exchange of ideas for humanity and also more efficient commerce. And those are two key pillars that kind of drove something home here, so that the result from going from this system, whereas this medieval system and the divine right of kings and all of that, the Renaissance brought about led to the Age of Enlightenment. And so we modernized our financial system so that commerce could work more efficiently, and we got democracy, and then we separated, it was church and state. And so imagine going back in time to like medieval times and telling someone that in the future we're going to have democracy and we're all going to vote on ideas and stuff like that. And I think their minds would just be blown. They'd be like, my pig farmer neighbor here who rolls around in the mud all day is going to decide what is like, no, the king. He's like, And so to strip away the idea that a religious leader and a political leader were different, once you stripped away the religious side of it, then the king, now he's just some dude. Right? Like it's a lot different than being, the direct descendant, direct line of communication. So that was a pretty radical change, what happened in people's minds. And so to analyze what some of the lessons were there, in the Enlightenment age, we got a quicker flow of information, and so that leads to a quicker rate of change. Monarchy had existed for thousands of years, and we're not even 1,000 years past the Renaissance. So, and how much has changed since then? So the rate of change increased. That created a lot of structural changes in society, social, economical, political, and the power dynamics that existed before the information exchange and ideas started flowing differently, they needed to be recalibrated and new equilibriums needed to be found because human coordination was strengthened. So there was less of that centralization structure even needed. All right, so let's fast forward to the internet now. Just very, very briefly, on the same concepts that came around through the Renaissance, on the internet side, we have important innovations like democratized publishing. Everybody has a voice. We can get information out there, and that's us here in WordPress. And then there's cryptoeconomic blockchains, which we'll be talking about here. And again, it's even faster exchange of ideas, and so even more efficient commerce is being built too. So think about the precedent that we came from the Renaissance and what we're experiencing now, but it's even faster information flows and even faster ability to exchange in commerce. So let's get into that, the crypto side a little bit, and just very, very briefly, let's talk about Bitcoin, because whenever I say crypto, people say Bitcoin, but that's not where I spend my time. So in the Bitcoin white paper, its goal was to be, here's the Bitcoin white paper. In 2009, it came out, and peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And right here, it says it's a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash, would allow payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. That was its opening line there of what it's going to be doing. So Bitcoin's goal was to create a peer-to-peer digital currency. So it had the currency with payments built in, and then blockchain to record the transactions, so you don't need a banking system. Okay, so let's fast forward now to Ethereum, which is where I spend my time. In Ethereum, it came out, this white paper for Ethereum came out in 2014, and then launched in 2015. And by Vitalik Buterin wrote this white paper. And right here it was talking about Bitcoin, and that how innovative it was, what its key innovations actually were. So one of its key innovations, this is right on the first lines here, is that the first was Bitcoin, having an actual currency that actually could generate value on its own and not tied to something external. And then right down there, the next one, there's also another equally important part, which is the concept of a blockchain. And Bitcoin kind of opened our brains to the idea of a blockchain and what capabilities were there. So Ethereum came to kind of exploit that it's much bigger than just currencies and payments. So the way that I like to phrase it, it's like to say that crypto is just Bitcoin, it's like saying the internet is just email. It's like there's an exchange of information back and forth, and that's stored somewhere, and that's about it. But the internet is so much more than that. And so Bitcoin is kind of like email in the crypto space, in my mind. If you're a Bitcoin person, then you have a different viewpoint maybe, but that's how I see it. So then on Ethereum, it's a smart contract dApp platform. So let me talk about what that is. It has the same two things, payments and blockchain for recording the transactions. But it also has tokens built on top of it to represent some type of digital asset. And then it has smart contracts, which are self-executing code. And we'll get into this stuff a little bit more. And then it has dApps, decentralized applications that interact with those smart contracts. So the dApps, the decentralized apps, are what you would interact with as a user. So it would be a web page you're just interacting with, or you have an app, just like we're used to. That's how you would interact with it. And then on the back end, it's interacting with smart contracts on the blockchain instead of some server. So with smart contracts and the dApps interacting, what we have is instead of more of like a world type currency, we have more of a world computer. There's execution there. There's programs there that we can all use, and nobody owns them. They're not hosted anywhere. They're on the internet layer of a blockchain itself. And so to go back to these references that kind of differentiate what had happened is that like if Bitcoin was the world's spreadsheet, just the list of transactions, then Ethereum would be the world's computer. And another way to say that, or another angle to look at it, if Bitcoin can host financial transactions, Ethereum can host an entire financial system. So it's much, much, much bigger. It's very grand what it can do. So let's dive in. So this right here, this is the Blockchain Explorer for Ethereum. And so you can go here and it shows live like what, here I'll give the information here, what slot we're on, what epoch we're on. And so basically all it is there's a slot put into the blockchain, Ethereum blockchain every 12 seconds, and a block can go into that. And that's what contains the transactions at that moment. And then on the Ethereum, and then the whole part there on the bottom, Ethereum has epochs, which are 32 slots. And those, so when you combine that all together, it goes to about 6.4 minutes every epoch. So think of what we're doing here. As humans, we're doing all these transactions. We have these entities where you go to Facebook, they have all your data, then it stores that information and you interact there. Then you go to the bank, do that, and it's in that database there. And then you go to Amazon and they have their database there. And we're kind of going all over the place, but they all have timestamps on that activity of what we're doing. So with blockchains, with the blocks just going like this every 12 seconds, what we're doing is kind of creating this record of humanity, of what we're doing as we move along in time. So we have this digital representation of what we're doing in the physical world that's moving through time with us. And we're kind of putting anchors to it. And it's global, everybody can see it, and it's open and transparent like that. So let's get just really, really fundamental. So people understand, because when I say crypto, people say Bitcoin, and they just kind of think money a lot of the time. And so I like to break down what blockchains are in this is probably way oversimplified, but it's something to say that kind of sticks and kind of gets an idea there. What do blockchains do? They sell blocks. It's weird to say, but they do. Those blocks that are going like that, they sell them. In order to make a transaction or to do anything, you have to pay the blockchain in order to do that, to be inserted. So there's a financial aspect to that. So you pay for all the transactions you do. You're not always the end user. It can be subsidized by someone else. There could be free transactions, depending on what the use case is. But the transactions on the blockchain cost money. And then there's operators, which are us. I run a node, I run Ethereum, and anybody can run it. So it's open to everybody. I have the whole blockchain myself, so I know what's on it, and it verifies with all the other nodes there. So it has operators that run the chain, and they get paid by that month. With those blocks that are sold, they get a portion of those fees so that they get paid to run the network. One thing that's important to know is that us as developers and builders, I think it's important to understand this kind of concept, because we deal with it all the time, but it's not always stated explicitly. When people talk about blockchains and crypto, people always say things like, well, people don't understand that, they won't care. And I'm like, yeah, they care, and they're going to use it, but they don't have to understand it, just like all technology. That's our job. We make the decisions as we build, and there's a statement made in the choices we make. Using WordPress is a statement about what you believe in and what technology should be used and how it should be used and who has rights to what. That is a statement when you're building. So blockchains will go mainstream when they really just become invisible. So a good analogy of that is when you think of, let's say, the early internet days. Let's compare to the online to on-chain transition that we did. In the early internet, you had dial-up. It wasn't always on. You actually had to go online. So you had to interact with the internet in order to do something on it. So you had to hey, internet, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm on, good. And then I can go do stuff. So that's how it used to be originally. Today's internet is just ubiquitous. I mean, you get notifications on my watch. It's on the internet. It's just there all the time on your apps, your phone, and it's coming to you. It's just always on now. So it's very different. And we don't necessarily go online. And so you hear that term a little bit less now, or quite a bit less than we did back in the early days, because you had to kind of give a concept of we're moving to something new. So you had to say going online. So I think going on chain is the same kind of concept. Data and interactions are going on chain instead of with databases and businesses, some of them, where it makes sense. So let's go to early blockchain, where we are now. You still have to connect with a wallet for the most part, so it's not always on when you're going to websites and using apps. It's not just kind of there all the time. You have to go on chain. You have to kind of make a conscious decision still. So it's kind of like we're in the earlier dial-up internet days. But tomorrow's blockchain will be ubiquitous. It'll always be on, and you won't go on chain anymore. You'll just be interacting with apps and websites, and then that will kind of just fade away, and people will just get used to how they interact with their money, their assets, and things like that. And it'll still be a hybrid. It's not just, I don't think that everyone's just going to move to this new thing, and everybody has to do it. It's just a transition, and there's times where it makes more sense, and there's times where it makes less sense. But it'll become more ubiquitous. You won't have to think about it. Users won't have to think about it. One important concept with blockchains is, in my opinion, all blockchains have unsolved problems. They're not done. Nobody has solved the blockchain issue. So from an Ethereum standpoint, we talk about it as the blockchain trilemma. And it's kind of like a project where you'll say, do you want budget, time, or quality? Have you guys heard that? Like trilemma like that, and you have to pick two? It's the same thing here. If you pick one of these, you can only pick two of these, the other one starts to lose. So that is a hard problem to solve. I'm in the Ethereum ecosystem, and we're not going to talk about it because there's not enough time today, but it has kind of a tiered, layered system. And so Ethereum itself focuses on security and decentralization. And then when you hear about those super high transaction fees and when it gets a big surge and everything, that's because it's not scalable at the base layer. So they sacrifice scalability on the base layer, on the Ethereum chain itself, for security and decentralization, and then they offloaded that to what they call layer 2 chains. And layer 2 chains focus on the scalability aspect, and then they have a contract on the Ethereum layer 1, and they're called roll-ups, and they roll up all that data and compress it really small, and then they can do a tiny transaction on Ethereum, and it includes lots of transactions on that layer 2, but it's all represented on layer 1. So you still have the security of layer 1. You can still get to your information on layer 1, but you get to execute on layer 2. And that has orders of magnitude scalability benefits, that prices you can have, instead of dollars for a transaction, you can have pennies or sub-pennies or free sometimes, depending on how it's structured. So when you think of blockchains, and all of them that are out there, and even more are going to come out, and every time we go through a cycle, you hear everybody screaming about their favorite blockchain and how all the rest are dumb and all that kind of stuff. But for a blockchain to be sustainable, it has to be able to pay its operators profitably. So the money that it generates from those transactions, the activity, it has to be able to fund itself. If it's getting funded, well, we'll get to that in a second. And it has to have an active development community. So if you don't hear about like its roadmap, how it's addressing this trilemma, because none of them are done, there's changes that need to be made in order for it to reach mass adoption, then you have to know, does it have a development roadmap? Where is it going? Because none of them are there yet. And then think of it as similar to open source projects like WordPress. It doesn't necessarily need a corporate or politically backed entity. It just needs heavy community involvement. It has to be more communal based. And blockchains need to have that structure. If they're backed by a political structure or a corporate structure, or they're funded by any other way, then that's not sustainable long term. It's fine if they do it to start out. I'm not begrudging how you need to get going, but your roadmap has to show that it can be self-funding. Because if anyone else is paying for that blockchain, they own it, and it's not the point of a blockchain, in my opinion. You're doing something else, and it's kind of just a crappy database at that point. Just use a regular database. You already control everything. Just do your own thing. It's not why use a blockchain. So what can they do? So obviously they can do the money thing, and we're going to talk about each one of these in a little more detail. So there's a bunch of things that they can do that I think are pretty fundamental, and then I'll kind of tie it up of how this is changing things. Let's talk about stable coins first. Those are tokens that are one-to-one pegged to the US dollar. And there's valid ones and there's shady ones. And some have collapsed, the shady ones, because there's tons of scams and things out there. It's a very unregulated space still. It's very emerging technology, and the internet's a bit like that. It can be a messy place, right? So when you think of what a digital dollar is, a stable coin, it's an on-chain like dollar-denominated liability that's just one-to-one. So the liability is on the blockchain that represents what's happening in the physical world. And in the physical world, those dollars are backed by, the good ones, are backed by actual cash. So you'll say, I want $1, a stable coin, $1 worth of stable coin. They'll take an actual dollar and put it into a bank account, or they'll buy dollar-denominated assets, like treasuries are a big one because they generate yield for the company behind the stable coin. So they'll take that money and put it into a treasury, and then that holds a stable value, and they can get the interest and make money by providing stable coins. So they make a lot of money. There's a different talk I did where I talked about that more. And then there's also starting to be crypto-backed ones by staked ETH and things like that. And I think long-term, they'll move away from pegging something to the physical world here, and so that it's innate to the system itself. So, but we're not there yet, and it needs a transition period. And how popular are stablecoins? This is the #1 use case of blockchains, period, right now, is stablecoins. That's just sending digital money, and not crypto, like digital dollars, actual dollar bills. So this is a little bit dated. I should have got a new one, but here's the top 10 cryptocurrencies by market capitalization, by like how much money's in there. And 2 of them on the list are US dollar stablecoins. This chart, how it calculates things, is a little inaccurate there, but it's $1 all the time. So 2 of the 2 different digital dollars make up a huge portion of what all the money that's in blockchains already into the crypto space. But when you add those together, and then with Bitcoin and Ethereum taking up the majority of that, they make up only about 10% of the total money that's in crypto, the market cap. But they represent about 70% of all activity on blockchains. It's just people passing on dollars. And so there's a lot more that could be said there, and I have another presentation I'll put up in a minute that you could learn more about that. But it's mostly, funny enough, the dollar, all that activity in US dollars and digital dollars is happening offshore. It's mostly outside of the United States. We're doing not as much here. So here's a real-world example of how these digital dollars are being used on blockchains. Coinbase has a cool little, I'll reference them. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. But if you buy USDC and then it's backed by $1, they give you yield. It was 5% at the time I created this. I think it's actually a little bit higher right now. So it's like a savings account. You can just put money in Coinbase. I'm not advocating these things. I'm just saying how it works. And so it's a way better savings account from a yield perspective, just parking your dollars there. Just let them sit there and it generates yield. And again, that yield comes from these tokenized treasuries and stuff they do on the back end. They pass that along to you. It has a they give you the US, their coin when you send it off of their platform to someone else. They cover the cost of the transaction fees, so it's free to send. So there's no fees at all, which is really great. Unlike when you pay with PayPal or something and someone has a fee, that kind of stuff, there's no fee. And then it comes with it has a debit card, which is pretty cool, so you can spend actual crypto digital dollars with your with a card, and you get crypto rewards on that. It's been as high as 4% right now as the market has been down, and now it's starting to come back up, but it was all the way down to 0.5%. But you can earn crypto, and you get to pick so you could be buying Bitcoin or Ether or whatever you wanted as you're making transactions, or you could just be getting cash back in digital dollars too. So it's kind of neat. It does all those things. So it's like a savings account that makes money, but you can use a debit card with it, and you get cash back on that card, and some pretty cool things right there. So, and the interesting thing is in the app, for example, say you have money in your normal bank account, regular dollars, and that's fiat money. We'll call it fiat money. You add it to the app, and it converts it to USDC. It converts it to a stable coin, and you could just do it right there in the app. And then while you're in the store, then run the card, and they'll get regular dollars. So you could go from regular dollars you could go from fiat to stablecoin, and then back from stablecoin to fiat, and just instantly, basically. And everybody gets the normal stuff that they're used to. They get the bank just transfers dollars. The company that you're paying gets dollars as well. So it's kind of superior in a way to a lot of stuff that exists right now in the traditional finance world, in my opinion, that you can already do some kind of cool stuff because of what's behind this. And this is just the beginning. So here's another real-world example of stablecoins. Again, this is Coinbase again, because they had a cool little thing that they did where they came out, if you have the Coinbase wallet app, you can do a peer-to-peer payment thing with digital dollars, with the USDC, and it's kind of neat. You can send money via links only. So what that means is in the app, you could say, hey, I owe someone $20, I owe you $20. I could open the app and just say, okay, here's $20, the payment for $20, and then I just get a link, and then you can just message that link to anybody, any way that you communicate with them. So you don't have to know like their Venmo, you don't have to know anything. You could do it over text, you could do it over email, you could do it over social media. You just send them a link, and there's a payment built into that link itself. So when they click that link, then they would open their Coinbase app, and then they would get that money. So there's no, to think about what's happening there, there's no information you need from the person other than you can communicate with them, via text somehow. There's no banks involved, and it's instant. You don't have some clearing of bank accounts and transferring behind the scenes, and it's borderless. There's no, and the crazy thing about that too is that zero fees. So you can send people money around the world, dollar bills, and no fees instantaneously, no banks involved, just human peer-to-peer money, like Bitcoin wanted to do, but stablecoins are doing it on Ethereum. So this is a good example where it's using that USDC stablecoin, which is a specific one that was on that list. And this is a really good example of blockchains becoming invisible. You just have a Coinbase app, it's like another Venmo kind of thing, and you just send a link to someone, they accept it, and then they get their money. And the concept of the blockchain controlling all of that is kind of abstracted away. So that's a good example. So in my opinion, and we'll get into it a little bit more, is digital money is just better than the old banking system. You can do things that you never could before. So if you want to know more about stablecoins a little bit, there's a presentation that I did that talked about it more in depth. If you wanted to see that, there's a QR code to go look at it. The video isn't posted yet, but it will be soon. And it was at an investment conference that I spoke at on crypto. So I see a few people scanning that, so I'll let you finish up. And then I'll post it soon enough here. So let's go back to more things that blockchains can do. So the obvious ones, I'll start with the money because that's the most obvious, but there's decentralized finance, or DeFi they call it. And that's where it's basically programmable money, which is fascinating to me. So you can do things like be your own bank. I just interact with my money directly on the blockchain, and it's custody there. I don't have to have a bank involved. And there's self-executing transactions. So things that banks do where you have to transact with them, think of like loans and things like that. It just can be automated and instantaneous because the code can just do it. And the code's open there, so everybody can read it. Everybody knows what it does. There's nothing hidden. And so you can just do financial things without anybody's permission, without any institutions involved. You just can do it. And there's really cool things in DeFi, but one of the coolest things that I've seen so far is like a self-repaying loan from a company called Alchemix, and you can deposit some token in there, the ones that they accept, and it goes behind the scenes and goes into these kind of yield generating activities, and it's very transparent about what it does. And then it generates yield, and it just pays back your loan for you over time. So the concept with that is they say, and that's what you can do with code. It's just automated, it's permissionless. You just go interact with the smart contract through the dApp, and now they say like you get to borrow against time is what they say. Like you can, instead of having to actually pay any money, you can just put money in, lock it up in this contract, it generates yield and just pays itself back. They give you the money back give you the money back so you can go actually use it, and that money is just stuck there in that contract, locked up, paying itself back. And you can take it out early if you want to forfeit some of that money or pay back the loan early. You can still do those things, or you can just let it ride and it'll pay itself back over time. And then once it's all paid off, you get all the money back. So just really cool programmable money things that are being unlocked, and again, like a whole financial system. Another thing on the token side, what tokens enable, there's just digital assets. So more than just digital money, you have digital assets. So there's digital property rights. They didn't exist before blockchains. We just remember all the Napster days and copying all that kind of stuff because there's no one file was the same as the next, as the next, as the next. You just copy infinitely. There's no actual ownership involved. And with tokens, you can do that. So digital property rights have been invented. And you can self-custody those. You don't have to have any type of institution. You can just have the token, and it's on the blockchain. It's programmable, again, like we talked about. And there's tons of non-monetary uses, which POAPs, NFTs, things like that, and have utility value. There's tokens you can get that give you voting rights on certain things. There's ones that help you with your identity, for example, with the self-repaying loan. When you're doing that, you has to know who you are and see what assets you have there and pass them in. And so there's like an identity aspect wrapped up in it, membership in certain communities through tokens. I have my talk last year at WordCamp is that one, and I talked more about, it was called I have the wrong title up there, but it was blockchain and WordPress, and I talk more specifically about blockchain and WordPress together in that one, and the non-financial side of the equation. I barely mentioned the finance at all. So another cool thing that they can do is, I mentioned briefly governance. The communities and stuff like that, these digital autonomous organizations are very self-operating and global and things like that. And so there's governance structures that are emerging that are pretty fascinating. People vote with their token on proposals and things that come up. And again, I talked about this a lot in my other talk that I just showed up there. And there's really cool things like bicameral systems coming out where there's like a DAO that represents some sort of like entity or some sort of protocol or whatever, some entity that does something. Instead of a corporation, there's like a DAO, a more loosely structured digital organization. And then they get these delegates so that people that get to kind of decide on the processes and the procedures of that institution. And then the public, anyone can go buy that token, and then they can vote and change and participate in it. And so it's kind of taken away, it's a different way to coordinate human activity and the way that we can do it in a very global, more decentralized way. So there's a lot of experimentation going on, and it's pretty fascinating to see. I think it's going to change some things pretty big. Another thing here is decentralized social networks, or DSOC, they call it sometimes. And so think of it like more like email, where with email you own your contact list, and you own the data, the emails. They're downloadable. If an email company gets mad at you and does something, you can go sign up with another email company, and you can point your DNS to that new email provider. You own it. It's your. They don't own it. So email is a little bit more open. It's an open protocol. And so decentralized networks, thinking of them becoming like that, so that you could use whatever app interface you wanted. Tons of companies will build all these different interfaces for the same social network, basically, the same social network on the blockchain. And it's just open. It's on the blockchain, so anybody can build an interface for it. So you can use lots of different front ends, where like Twitter and Facebook used to have some of their APIs open for the public to build different interfaces, and they just started closing them down. But on blockchain, you can't do that. It's just out for everybody. So that gives you a lot more censorship resistance and things like that. And then like a few of the companies involved would be like Farcaster is a big one. They're like a Twitter competitor, which is one I like, and Lens Protocol is another one, and it's still kind of early on. Another cool thing that's happening with blockchains is ENS. So it's like DNS, but it uses human-friendly names to point to Ethereum addresses, those big, long things. So if you had WordCamp Phoenix 24.eth, say you wanted to buy your ticket in the future, you'd be in whatever app, and you want to buy your ticket, and then you just say, send it to WordCamp Phoenix 24.eth, and you would just send it there, and then it would go to there because of ENS. So you could just use that. And then that way, and then again, there could be like another contract on that side, so you could just send the money to that address, and then a ticket could come back to the sending address that bought that ticket instantaneously, and you'd have a digital ticket instantaneously right there. So there's ENS, and then it's decentralized on the blockchain, so people can't interfere with ENS, with that structure like they can with DNS. And GoDaddy just this week announced this, where they've integrated it with. They've integrated ENS, or they're beginning. I don't know if it's available for everybody, but they just did it this week, where you can now point your .coms and the traditional domain names we know to Ethereum addresses. So instead of that WordCamp Phoenix 24.eth, you can say WordCamp Phoenix 24.com. Just send money there, and it actually is interactive with blockchain. So again, blockchains are becoming invisible. They're going behind the scenes, and they're starting to interact with things that we're already used to, the .coms and all of that. So yeah, so it's a pretty big thing. So what would be the result of this, where in the pre-Renaissance, we went from all that fun stuff, and then in the Renaissance brought about all of this stuff with a modern financial system, democracy, and the separation of church and state. So if we come over to this new world here with the internet, it has led to the digital age instead of the Enlightenment age, and we're having a blockchain-based financial system is emerging and being built right now, and so it's further modernizing. And we're getting governance as a community matter now, instead of, there was monarchy, then governing became like a public matter, and you had democracy. And now it's becoming more of a communal matter, to where those communities can govern themselves with more autonomy and less oversight or need for infrastructure from other systems. So what I think is happening is that what this renaissance, the internet renaissance, is doing is we're beginning the process of the separation of money and state. That's what I think is happening right now on the money side. It's not what we have right now. I'm saying in the future, it'll come about. It looks like this is the beginning of that process for humans. So some of the important lessons that we had from the Enlightenment age, let's see, when we do it now from the digital age, think about it is that we still have these same benefits, or the same kind of results, is that the increase in information flow creates a different different rate of change in society, but now we'll just have more of it. And then there's structural changes to society, social, economical, political changes that come about, but now we'll have even more of that. And then it's like power dynamics find new equilibriums, so that human coordination is strengthening again. We're becoming a tighter knit network as humanity itself. In my opinion, that's what's happening, and less centralization needed. So a lot of the institutional structures that are above us, they will be just less needed. We'll still have them, but I mean, they're just less needed. And over time, that'll change. And so we're just getting more of those things, and more and more and more. Like, and it's happening. So when you think about, well, when is all this going to come about? This is an important idea to understand from my perspective, where it seems like the rate of change is proportional to the flow of information, how fast it moves. The faster it moves between us, the more change happens. So if you go back to the printing press, these are very loose numbers. This is when they became popular, not when they were invented, but around there. The printing press came out around 1400s, internet 1990s. And in the printing press, you got double entry bookkeeping around 1500s. Enlightenment 1700s is when it really took off. Democratic governments really took hold in the 1800s. And then the internet, we had BitTorrent, with its peer-to-peer file exchange, Bitcoin, peer-to-peer money, Ethereum, with smart contracts and everything like that. We put democratized publishing, and WordPress can be plugged in there as well, that we all get the voice. And so as you can see here, it was measured in centuries at the printing press rate of information flow. And in the internet, it's being measured in decades, or decades it's supposed to say. So yeah, it's supposed to say decades. I copied and pasted a little italicized thing right at the last minute and forgot it. I knew there would be a mistake that I'd catch. And then, yeah, so measured in decades. So think about that. These big structural changes, I think, will be happening at a more rapid pace. So what I think one of the major benefits of blockchains is that they can become this global anchor for the shifting times, that we can start, the news and all of that, they'll focus on the things that are crumbling because of the rate of change, the less centralizations that are happening, and they'll make it look like the world is falling and stuff, because that's their job, to make money, right? Scare you for money, that's kind of their goal. And so the blockchains being like this anchor where we start to have property rights and asset management and governance models and money more peer-to-peer, we're actually strengthening. So look for that. Pay attention to that as time goes forward. And just don't always believe like the news and corporations and politicians will be saying whatever, because their structures are 20th century structures, and we're in the 21st century, and we need 21st century structures and tools to get through. So lastly, I don't have time to go over all of this. I'll kind of wrap it up. But if you wanted to get into development in Web3, I would highly, highly encourage WordPress to start, building, connect with wallets, have visitors interact with things, start building these tools in WordPress so that no-code websites can benefit from these things. We're just about there. We're barely scratching the surface. I have to jump over so many things here, and each one of these topics, I am creating presentations and I've spoken about a bunch of these things and keep going because there's just so much there. So it's very dramatic what's happening, and I'm here for it. I think it'll be amazing. So if you're interested in any of these things and would want to talk about projects that you're working on, or need consulting or speaking opportunities, I love to teach about this stuff, and that's what I do with my time. And so thank you, everyone. And let me come right for my presentation. And again, you can get the slides right there if you want them.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions for Jeremy? Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Suitable for the time that we have, or
I'll try and be brief.
Yeah.
I'll just say, no, you're wrong.
So if you think of the current state of technology, you've got, AI, which really replaces, and in the near future replaces, the redundancy of work, and most work is redundant. An NFT or thing like that is really what gives value to data. If you think of property in the real property sense, the thing that gives property transactional value isn't the land itself, it's the deed that accompanies the land. And the blockchain kind of simultaneously allows you to spend and receive value at the same time. So for example, you go to the vending machine, you buy a Coke, you simultaneously have your Coke and Coke stock. And, so value spent also means value increases, which kind of tears down the notion of what the idea of value in exchange for work actually is.
Yeah.
And so you have this period where, the idea is decentralization and the idea is a better state of humanity. But as humans, we tend to mess things up a lot. We go decentralized to centralized voluntarily most of the times, and then we go, oh, wait a minute, we want to go back the other way, whether that's forms of government, the way that we interact socially. The internet was supposed to be a libertarian paradise, and we centralized that within pretty intensely within 15 years. So what's our best case scenario, and how do we, and on the other end, without going into like fear side of things, how do we mess this up?
Well, we're good at, like you said, we're good at that, so we'll definitely mess it up, but it'll be, the way that I look at things is like, is there just improvement? Are we moving towards something better? And there's an ebb and flow I've noticed in a lot of things. So say, the founding of the United States and the Constitution and democracy spreading and constitutional form of government spreading throughout the world and that kind of thing. And then 100 years ago, then we had all these authoritarian regimes and world wars and stuff, and it kind of like flowed back to centralization. And then out of that grew a little bit more decentralization. We kind of got world institutions that kind of coordinate a little bit better between nations, and that helped a little bit. And then now there's a lot of evidence that it's going and it's re-centralized again. There's a lot of authoritarianism creeping up again. There's a lot of centralization with the internet itself, you said. Web 1 was supposed to be kind of this utopia open. Web 2 kind of companies came in and put that all together and took control and got more closed. And then now Web 3 is an answer to that. So I think what we're going to do is kind of flow back outwards a little bit, and we'll kind of flow in again and then back out again, and we'll just kind of do that. And if history is any lesson, the thing that I always say is, I was reading a paper by Einstein one day and about socialism and what he thought of it back in the day. And it was like he said this thing about the great pessimism in society today, and he was wording it. And I'm like, that just sounds like people talking today. And this was during the pandemic I was reading it, so I was like, yeah, you're speaking my language, but this is the 1940s. So I think we always are afraid of an existential threat. Every group of humans is doing that. And if you were ever to talk to any of them and say, that fear that you had, did it play out? Everybody in the past was wrong 100% of the time. So my thing is, I just think the probability is that we'll keep going and we'll